The first time Kelvin walked into my home, all of his things, his toys and stuff, were in a single box, which he carried in from the car. He had been removed from his home 18 months earlier and had been in 3 separate foster homes before mine. I like to think of that box as a metaphor for the way Kelvin carried the stories of his life with him. He entered my home with lots of bits and pieces of the past that I would hear over time and help piece together with him. As his number of possessions have grown to fill up his room and most of the corners of our house, so have the stories of his life grown. He has so many more parts of his past and present to help make himself and his story whole. Helping Kelvin live in this place of wholeness is one of the main reasons I went to Amara to foster and adopt a child to begin with. Their reputation for centering children in their mission was a key factor in my decision. Amara's commitment to being child-centered has enhanced our lives. I met Kelvin when he was 7 years old. When I met Kelvin, he was his mom and dad's first child, their only son. He was a big brother 4 times over. He was living in his 3rd foster home. He was living away from all of the family he had ever known. All those things he had already been in the first 7 years of his life, he had lost. Because Kelvin had lived a long time with his birth family, I knew that a new family was going to be something to approach with tenderness. However, Kelvin got right to the point. As we pulled out of the foster parents' driveway, Kelvin said, "So, are you going to adopt me?" I was not prepared for that question on that day, but here we were. I was driving him to my home, now his home. I told him that adoption was something that I wanted, but that it was a decision that was going to be made by a lot of people, not just me. I knew that Kelvin needed a home, and I was prepared to be there for him as long as he would need me. For us, adoption didn't come for almost 2 years, but in that time, we became mom and son to each other. During those first 2 years, Kelvin and I had to figure out how to create a new family with just the 2 of us. We had to establish what kind of rules and rituals our household would have, what 7-year-olds eat for dinner, and we had to establish relationship. One thing that seemed to incorporate all these things was nightly bedtime stories. Every night, we ended our day, PJs and teeth brushed, sitting close side by side in his room, reading stories. I had a small collection of stories from my own childhood, and we read those interspersed with a new generation of stories. So we went from Charlotte's Web to My Father's Dragon, from Narnia to Hogswort. I love to tell stories, especially about Kelvin. My parents wait expectantly for our calls and times to share stories about him and his life. As we grew together, we had a lot of support from my family. New cousins for Kelvin, more aunts and uncles, and something he had not really had in his life before, grandparents. One of my favorite stories about Kelvin and I learning to become a family came thanks to his granddad. Although Kelvin was 7, he would not hold my hand, not for fun or connection or comfort the way some kids reach for their parents' hand, and certainly not for safety, like when we were crossing the street. But a few weeks after Kelvin moved in, my parents came to visit. And to my astonishment, I saw how this brand new grandfather got Kelvin to hold his hand. In that wise way that grandparents have, he lovingly held out his hand and asked Kelvin, "Can you help Granddad cross the street?" And that request allowed Kelvin to offer his hand back in support and allowed me to see Kelvin's beautiful heart, so willing to help this old, new guy in his life with his sweet little hand. Kelvin is 13, so the hand he offers me now is the one that helps bring in the groceries and program my phone. We continue to create good stories together, especially when we hit the road. We've traveled together near and far, and one thing we do while traveling is visit family. Birth family, adoptive family, what we call friend family. About once a month, we travel to a small town near the Oregon border to visit Kelvin's birth mom, Shar. The first time I met Shar, Kelvin had lived with me 6 months, but had not seen her for about a year. What I will remember about that visit was the embrace. They leapt into an embrace. It was breathtaking. It was the greatest manifestation of love that perhaps I have ever witnessed, and the most love I had seen from Kelvin in that short time that I knew him. There was no doubt from that moment on that in whatever ways we could, we would make sure to nurture that connection to Shar. During our monthly visits, we do lots of fun and routine things together. During a recent trip to Walmart, Shar grabbed the shopping cart as we walked into the store, and Kelvin remarked how he remembered that she used to have him hold on to the side of the shopping cart when they were shopping. Moments like this just light up my mind. First, I'm always struck at how well Kelvin tells his own stories. And second, these moments are little windows for me into the life of this child that I love, who, at times when I didn't know him, I like to peek in and see, like, what was he doing? What was his life like? Oh, yeah, they went shopping, and Kelvin is the oldest. He had to hold on to the side of the cart. Probably the little ones were inside. But lastly, and most importantly, that comment struck me in this way. Shar mothered him. No matter what happened to their lives, the many things that went wrong that led to foster care and to adoption, she did mothering things. Like my instincts to want to hold his hand as we crossed the street, she wanted him holding on to the cart. It's a motherly thing to do, to want to keep your kid close and safe. And the opportunities we have had throughout our lives together for Shar to continue to mother him, to encourage his successes, to spend time together, these are gifts of great value. I want to make sure right now to say a very special thank you to Kelvin, who gave me permission and support to share these parts of our story with you. Even though Kelvin did not want to stand up here himself, I think his support for my effort is his way of making sure his message gets across, and his message is very clear. The connection with birth families is really important. There are so many stories to tell about Kelvin, it's so hard for me to only be allowed to tell a few. As his mom, I really love helping to put his actual life story together with him. When he tells me stories about things that happened to him before we met, I write them all down. Little stories like about the one where when he learned to draw his E's, he would draw lots and lots and lots of horizontal lines. And big ones about his role as the big brother in his family. We've lived some incredible stories together. We have a map on the wall where we track all the places we've traveled together, how many states we've been in. We celebrate every year on the day he moved in. We've had 6 of those celebrations now. And we celebrate each year on the day he was adopted. We're about to celebrate our 4th. But one of the many gifts we have had from knowing Kelvin's birth family is we get more Kelvin stories to help add chapters to his book of life. We recently met an aunt and cousin who had wonderful stories about Kelvin. I received this text from his cousin shortly after we met. This note reminds me that people in Kelvin's life wondered about him, worried about him. And this is a part of his story that I'm really glad we have. He was missed. People thought of him. And during those long months in foster care, shuffling around and landing in so many houses with so much sadness, we know that part of that story was that he was never really alone. He had family loving him from afar, and now he has so much family, and we can all love him together right up close. Amara played such an important role in all of this. Amara has helped us make all of these connections, starting from the very beginning. Amara introduced me to Kelvin. It's hard to describe in words what a gift that has been for me. And Amara made sure I was prepared for all the new things I would face before I welcomed Kelvin home. Amara made sure I was well supported as a foster parent, even introducing me to some very helpful veteran and foster and adoptive parents who remain dear friends. And today, Amara continues to support us as an adoptive family, both by supporting our relationships with Kelvin's birth family and by giving Kelvin opportunities to develop relationships with other adoptees. I really like the way beautiful things often come together from the gathering of many, sometimes different components, like quilts or kente cloth, jazz or harmony. I love the many ways that Kelvin is complete and whole, thanks to how the many people and parts of his life family, ancestry, adoption, friendships, community come together for him. I have deeply enjoyed the ways I get to help Kelvin build his life story, most importantly, by becoming his mother and getting to be the one who walks with him through the days, enjoying the new stories we are making and preserving the ones that are part of his history. I believe very strongly that you cannot expect a child to thrive if you do not allow them to be their whole selves. Kelvin and I continue to nurture him on this path, and I am looking forward to being in the front row as Kelvin grows up and forges new relationships and writes new chapters in his life story.